Let's talk about how the first 2024 presidential debate can change the outcome of this general election. So, just for starters, folks, today we're going to be discussing how the states that are actually in sway for this election might move. And so, we do have about a dozen states that are somewhat variable, and then there's about a half dozen that really do matter. Then we do have other polls that we're going to consult as well. And we also have a liberal and a conservative spin to it. Of course, we don't know a lot of things that are going to happen, such as like, will Donald Trump maybe present a VP in that debate? Will he announce it then? That could be a complete 360 of what anybody could expect, which is why I'm making this video so that you have a bearing as to what'll happen. Plus, it's a good time capsule to really get what's going to occur, and maybe we can contrast and compare. So, first and foremost, we we need to really address this. Okay, this is just below par. This thumbnail and title by Let's Talk Elections, who's a liberal, by the way, he says Donald Trump just presumptively lost the first presidential debate, which is just showing how much people are somewhat cocky of Joe Biden. I think there is a small contingent of people like on Twitter, Harry Sison, who again is such a big D-bag and gets paid to shill Joe Biden. And so it's pretty impressive that there is a small niche that really do think Joe will win, which brings me to my next point though. Most people don't actually think Joe Biden's going to win at all. What do I mean? Most people are saying, well, as long as Biden is having a pulse and doesn't fall asleep during the debate, then he wins. Well, it tells you a couple of different things. This will explain the point I'm about to make. So when it comes down to it, the people that are sweeping it up for Joe and trying to lower the bar for expectations are really just facing a losing election prospect, because had people been more apathetic, or at least, a little maybe empathetic towards Joe Biden's candidacy, they would actually expect more out of him. But instead, they're actually just saying, well, as long as he's alive, then it's okay. There is a contingent of the country, you could label them maybe 40%ers or whatever, but there is a solid fraction of the country right now that will vote for whoever the Democrat is, no matter what the circumstances. If Joe Biden were to have a stroke and he were paralyzed, they would still vote for Joe Biden just out of spite against Trump, and also just because it's a utilitarian thing. Okay, so just imagine this. Now, when it comes down to it, Joe Biden's dispopularity, if that's even a word, I just made it up, and so there you go. 17.7 negative point share when it comes to being disapproved. It's a really bad look for him for a couple of different reasons. First of all, the onus is on him to really recover the lead that he's ceded to Trump over the last several months. So when it comes down to it, you see that Donald Trump is winning the popular vote according to the aggregated polls by 1.5, which is in line with reality, in my opinion. So again, Trump lost the popular vote at this time last election by 9.4. Now, obviously, that oversampled the Democrats back then because Trump only lost it by 4 or 5. But the point being is that this is still a really good result. Even if the polls are biased for the Republicans, that's still a win in the Electoral College, which we'll get to later. Now, here's why you need to tune out the Democratic hedging of this debate. For people to say, well, as long as he's, tacitly okay and cognizant that, he ought to really be the president. These people are already sold. Donald Trump is not trying to appeal to the Jake Tappers. He's not trying to appeal to the moderation team at CNN. He's trying to appeal to the people in the middle and obviously his own kind. And so when it comes down to it, you got to appeal to your own tribe, the Republicans and the center. And when it comes down to it, the people that are going to vote for a guy who's clearly, in candidacy for a retirement home you really need to look at these people and just say, okay, you do not need to appeal to these, Donald. And even you, let's say you're a Republican watching this video, you do not need to sell yourself on like, oh my God, how is Trump going to convince people that Joe is senile? That's not really the point. You're trying to make that case, but for the center, like I said, the swing votes, the Joy Behars, these types, not even Bill Maher, but people to the left of that are going to be solidly for Biden, and they will sweep it up no matter what. Now, when it comes down to it, there have been a couple of factors in this. The most basic one is that if Trump has the lead, which he literally does, Nate Silver, who was really just completely bullish on Biden winning in 2020, and really just kind of blew his load there, kind of. When it comes down to it, Nate Silver still has Trump having a 2 to 3 odds chance of winning, which is the reverse prognostication he had in the last election. So just imagine that. And it actually shows that in 2012, at this point, I think that Obama had a 60% chance of winning re-election against Romney, and he won handsomely against Mitt, which is to say, of course, that if Trump has a better odds than Obama, that's a really good sign, in fact. So what it really explains is the general trend that Biden is losing to Trump just over time, and gradually things are getting worse for Joe, whether it becomes an age issue where he gets crystallized and his memory gets worse, he gets less witty, etc. And then when it comes down to the economy, inflation, interest rates, all this, it's getting worse. There's a malaise going on, not dissimilar from Jimmy Carter 30 years before I was born, but still. So again, let me elaborate. When it comes down to it, Joe Biden losing to Donald Trump means that he needs to impress. It's not a win to just be decent. The people, the Democrats on the mainstream media, the fake news, so to speak, these types will say, well, he's keeping our vote if he just stays cognizant. Well, guess what? You alone are not going to win. That 40% contingent of people that are diehard Joe bros, this 38% approval people are not going to cut it for the election. Not only are they not even a big group to begin with, but their turnout is going to be suppressed from 2020, if only because, again, their guy is weak. And so to back that horse is not going to cut it. Just them alone pushing the sled will not get it across the finish line. But when it now comes to somebody like Donald Trump, his tribe is a little bigger than Joe's floor. And, to be honest, when it comes down to it, the turnout is also reversed, where, again, Donald Trump's people are dying to vote for him. And the Joe Biden people are just dying, period, when it comes down to their enthusiasm and their visceral excitement for their candidate here. And so, again, when you have a guy who's on the back foot polling wise, you need to actually win. Look at what Donald Trump did in the first debate. We're going to actually look into the facts of the matter. I just saw that debate just to get a little bit of a understanding and context as to what happened. I've seen those debates like 5 times at this point. And I will tell you this, Donald Trump was playing on the back foot polling wise the whole time. It kind of illustrates why he was so desperate to cut off Joe Biden and talk over him in the first debate. This is not likely to happen because of the mic situation in this upcoming debate. Today, it seems like they're going to cut the thing off after 2 minutes of speaking or whatever the allotment is, which is to say, of course, that Donald Trump will not, stumble over himself like he did last time in that first debate 4 years ago. And what I think is more interesting than that even is that Joe Biden has given ample opportunity in this case to screw himself over. If we recall, in 2020, he was already cognitively declining, but there was some sort of ambiguity to say, well, he's older, but he's still intact. There was a little bit of a cope there. Kind of like if you have a girl who's like 2 months pregnant, if you're really smart and you have enough information, she's pregnant, but she could wear a hoodie and nobody's going to know the better. And so I think if you're already having a confirmation bias and you're watching the debate 4 years ago and you hate Donald Trump, you're going to say, okay, Joe, you're okay. And in fact, when you look at the crosstabs, I think from 2020 and CNN, you'll notice that information shows that voters were about 50-50 on whether or not Joe Biden was fit to be president insofar as his mental decline is concerned. Whereas if it's already at 50%, give it another 4 years of decline, it's going to look really bad. I mean, if you have an ice cream cone that's been melting and then you add another 20 minutes of holding it in your hand, it's going to be fucking more or less a sticky puddle. Okay. So think about that. He's a melting ice cream cone, a double scoop one at that. And when it comes down to it, Joe Biden is going to make an ass out of himself. Let's look at another couple factors. When it comes to the public health emergency that happened in that election 4 years ago, I probably shouldn't use the word for the algorithm, but anyway, the point being is that when it comes down to it, that sort of really hurt Donald Trump way more than anybody could have possibly expected. Reason being is that, of course, he was losing on all fronts there. He was on the back foot because he was the incumbent during something really nasty like that, and he was seen as not handling it correctly. In hindsight, he didn't do that bad of a job, to be honest. But that being said, of course, when it comes down to it by Joe Biden's standard, he was able to kind of nitpick all those little eccentricities about how X amount of people perished in that amount of time. And it was a tragic thing. And he was able to springboard off of that. And he had a very, a whole cacophony of things to attack Trump on. Again, it's the reverse now. You are having Joe Biden as your witness testimony. He's basically playing defendant, and he's on the witness stand in this case for the first time ever, where you have an actual antagonist. I mean, the biggest antagonist for Biden in 4 years ever since Peter Doocy. So, I mean, at that point, Joe has not really been contested. And so when it comes down to it, I think that Donald Trump will hold his feet to the fire, even if the moderator in CNN, Dana Bash and Jake Tapper, they won't. So I think that still Joe will be under a lot of fire. And it's going to be the reversal of when Donald Trump was playing defense on the virus, obviously. Another thing would be when it comes down to the economy. The economy's been horrible. Crime's horrible. Again, crime was low-key an issue for Donald Trump. Remember, there was a whole talking point about how Trump let the riots happen and that the BLM stuff was Trump's fault, which is sort of true. You could really debate that at the time, and I was sweeping it up for Donald Trump back then. But the point being is that the crime issue is totally on the Democrats now. And it's worse than it was in 2020. Not obviously in the peak violence because the cities aren't on fire, but the cities are ran through with fentanyl and crack addicts and all that. So it's really bad. Okay, so let's look at the takeaway from this debate versus the first one last time. So the takeaway was that Trump derailed the first debate in 2020, which is true. Obviously, I thought Trump won that debate just like as a personal fan, but I also think that objectively he came off as a little bit, crazy. And that's not really the best look if you're trying to be the president. So that was just a given. And then with Joe Biden, again, he was sharper back then. And so he was actually able to catch Donald on a couple things. That's not really going to be the case. For you football fans like me, I will give you an analogy, okay? Joe Biden winning the 2020 election was like when Peyton Manning won the Super Bowl in 2015 against the Panthers. He had a noodle arm, and it was based off of the circumstances therein that he got kind of lucky that he won the Super Bowl in that year. But God forbid you actually had Peyton Manning on a Super Bowl team in 2019. You age him 4 years, and God knows how bad that would be, okay? So just imagine that. So, I mean, that's really a good analogy in my opinion. You had a guy who just barely won anyway in the first place through a lot of other things going for him at the time, and then you age him 4 years and it's even worse. Okay, so it's like you're in debt and then you just add another credit card. It's not going to fix the situation at all. Another angle that I may speak on as well is the drug test angle. Donald Trump challenged Joe Biden to a drug test. Now, this is perfect, of course, because it's really a foolproof scenario. You are kind of poisoning the well of the perception of Joe Biden as a cognizant person if he does need stimulants to stay awake and whatnot for 90 minutes and to stand up for that amount of time. No other president has really had that issue in contemporary history, and so it's becoming more evident for that reason. And so I just think that it's a foolproof idea from him. The Democrats might say, oh, it's insane, it's a conspiracy. Well, okay, well, then just do it, okay? You could just, I don't know what to say. I mean, if you're innocent, you would testify, using that analogy. And so if you're not on drugs, just do the test. My prediction is obviously that Joe Biden's on some sort of stimulant, amphetamines, maybe Adderall, something like that, which, again, I don't even have a problem with. And if you were honest about it, nobody would take issue with it. A lot of college kids take Adderall. If an 80-year-old takes Adderall, I don't think that's surprising. And you know what? If Donald Trump could do it, that might even help him stay focused and not interrupt. And I think that actually be good for him. So let's get Trump on Adderall. I mean, there's no issue. What really went wrong here for Joe is to not comply with that sort of demand, because again, it kind of raises into issues like, what the hell else are you getting? Okay. It's one thing to pop a 30 per, Adderall, one pill, and be normal, or versus like, obviously this guy, Joe, could be taking a high dose, which people might be concerned about. I don't care. Or also it could be something else that I don't know of. I'm not an expert on drugs, but I mean, it could be like a shot in the ass, they'll say rhetorically, but very literally, it could be a shot like adrenaline or whatever it is. We don't know. Here's another aspect. Even if there is drugs at play, the truth is that Joe Biden, he did do, and this is I'm just speculating here, but I'm pretty sure that that Joe Biden during the State of the Union address in this past year, months ago, was on some stimulants of some sort. And you could tell because he was higher energy than usual, but it wore off after a while. So what my assumption is that they did literally give him a shot in the ass or something like that only lasted him like 30 or 40 minutes. And then once you got towards the end of the speech, he started tapering off and started getting into these bird walks mentally where he's like, oh God, and he would ramble on. And so with that being said, I think it's pretty clear that whatever drugs they do give him will not last him the full debate anyhow. So again, the debate's supposed to be an hour and a half, and if the State of the Union was less time than that, and he already veered off towards the end of that anyway, I feel like the second half of the debate might be even worse than the first for Joe for several reasons, and the one I'm making right now to you guys is that obviously the drugs will be wearing off, and you might say, well, they're going to give him a higher dose, which in my opinion might be super unhealthy because think about it. They gave him the stimulants for the State of the Union where he notably did better than in other past appearances over the past 3 years. The reason being is that obviously if they could just give him the stimulate every day, they probably would, because then he wouldn't get all these gaps all the time. But I'm assuming they save the stimulants for special occasions because they might be really bad for his heart, which obviously like Adderall and stuff like this increases heart rates and stuff like that. And so for an 80-year-old man to be doing this kind of shows that they're kind of scared that if they give him too much that he might overdose. And by overdose, I mean like having a stroke or super high palpitations that'll make him look like all sweaty and stuff. And so maybe that could be another concern. And so insofar as the Adderall or whatever stimulant they might use on him, they would have to double or triple the dose for him to last the entire debate like he was cognizant sharp-wise at the State of the Union. Mind you, even at the State of the Union, I think he was less sharp than he was in 2020 either. So even if they have him on the drugs the whole time, which is nigh impossible, he still wouldn't be as cognitively efficient as he was in 2020. Also, when it comes to Donald Trump, he's aged 4 years since then as well. Difference being is that Trump, for whatever reason, and this sounds kind of gay, but he's more vivacious. I think that's the term, right? Vivacious than Joe Biden. He's more like, if he looks like a rough 55-year-old man versus Joe, who looks all the part of 82. So Donald Trump is in his late 70s as well. He's only 3.5 years younger than Joe, but he acts a lot younger. And I think he more or less health-wise is younger, even though he's like chubbier. But the truth is that, when I saw him in person, I think in Detroit, he looked skinnier for like 20 pounds skinnier. In 2020, he was kind of stress eating, you could tell, and he was kind of stressed out. Obviously, you're president. That's fine. The point being, though, is that the guy is about as sharp as he was before. You can make an argument that in 2015 and 16, he was a little quicker, which obviously that was 8 years ago. But I think that he's somewhere between 2016 and 2020 insofar as competency and like sharp rhetorical acumen. And so he's still better off than he was 4 years ago. Somehow it's a miracle the way the guy ages, but it's great. Whereas with Joe, again, he's getting worse. So think about it that way. And so, in summation, I think that Donald Trump will handily win this debate. People will try to spin it later on, and you'll notice tomorrow where they're going to say something like, well, Joe actually did surprisingly well given X and Y and Z. And so, honestly, he's pretty good. I really doubt that. I think he's going to do worse than the liberals think. And I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle between what the liberals are coping and idealing, like basically saying like best case scenario, Joe is actually really good. And then the worst case, obviously, for the Republicans is to say like, oh my God, Joe, he literally had a heart attack. So I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle of that. I know that's a basic sort of like safe assumption, but I think that the way I added detail to this makes it less of a cop-out idea. But yes, I'm super excited, guys. I've been insanely busy. You guys have no idea the past several days, which is unfortunate, but I have other stuff to do in real life. Anyway, the point being is that I hope to get back on the saddle real quick. And I've been waiting years to see this debate. So let's hope to God we get the debate that we've all been waiting for, baby. Oh my God. Comment down below what you think. This is more so a time capsule. I'm not trying to get views off of this. It's just like, I want this to be out there so that I can compare and contrast, because before my balls dropped like 4 years ago, I made this content too. The Dalisto edition, basically. And so it's just great to check back with that. So comment down below what you think and like the video if you want me to succeed. If you don't, then leave. See you all in the next one though. Adios.